So it turns out that human beings actually have different levels of sensitivity. And what that means is that one person, another person can experience basically like the same sensory experience or emotional experience, but with different levels of intensity. And so I learned about this. This comes from research by Professor Tom Boyce and Bruce Ellis, and they developed kind of a metaphor for highly sensitive people, which they call orchids, 30% of the population. Other 30% of the population that is kind of low sensitivity, they call that dandelions. And then the remaining 40% they call tulips, which are in the middle. But when I first learned about this, I thought that's just so incredibly interesting, because I had thought before maybe there was something to this, that, one person can be kind of wired to just experience everything a bit more intensely or a bit more vividly. Whereas to maybe some other people, it's kind of just like dampened. It's just not as intense of a felt experience. Well, and that is exactly what their research found. So in this video, we'll talk a little bit about that and think about what the implications are. So we tend to think, right, of genetic differences between people as things like, your height, your hair, your eye color, and maybe even some personality things like more introverted or more extroverted. But it turns out one of the primary differences is this sensitivity level. So it's just, again, how sensitive are you to your experiences, both good and bad. So it's not a one-sided thing. Again, it's just that everything is going to be a bit more vivid. You're a bit more attuned. So you can imagine a person, I'm kind of this way, whom tastes are not all that flavorful. I sometimes joke that I have like goat mouth, like I'll just eat anything. Maybe mood-altering substances, nothing crazy, but like caffeine or alcohol, I still feel them, but they're not quite as like powerful or vivid. And maybe even like pleasure or pain. Of course, I can distinguish between pleasure and pain. I much prefer pleasure, not as big of a fan of pain. But again, they're just not quite as crazy intense as compared to maybe someone else who it's like a little pinprick, or they stub their toe and it's this very immense pain, or they have, half a cup of coffee and they're like, oh, I'm feeling really good. It's just a matter of kind of vividness. And I know I've thought this was true for quite a while. As I said, I have friends who, one of them, it's like you have a couple beers and they're really kind of upbeat and excited. Or my friend's dad, actually, he'll take like a single Advil or ibuprofen and he'll say like, oh, this thing's kind of making me feel funny. Whereas I could take 5 of those and it wouldn't be the healthiest thing, but like I'm not going to know I've taken an Advil. So really what we can think of is these orchid types, highly sensitive persons, HSPs, they're sometimes called in psychology, as more highly leveraged to their experiences and their environment. And now this is important implications for relationships and for child development. So it turns out, and you look at the research on this, that these orchid types tend to respond more adversely to traumatic, toxic, or adverse environments in their upbringing. So again, they're kind of more attuned to their environment. And so when they're in these negative environments, it tends to have a greater impact on them. Now, conversely, if they're in nourishing environments, these types of people are more likely to be exceptional when we think about like creativity, intellectual outcomes, relationship building, right? All of these different things. They're kind of highly leveraged. So in a good environment, they're just really incredible outliers. But in a negative environment, they tend to experience a lot more adverse outcomes. Now, dandelions, on the other hand, are just generally more resilient. So when we think about this, I think the first thing to understand is like self-awareness, is to understand where you fall on this spectrum. Are you naturally a highly sensitive person? You're just very attuned to both the good and to the bad? Are you more kind of maybe your feelings are a little bit more dampened or a little bit more mellow, both the good and the bad? You could be a dandelion, or you could be somewhere in the middle, and you can actually search the HSP test or HSP assessment, and it'll place you on the spectrum. But self-awareness is useful because then you can understand your own reactions. If you tend to be the person that feels really intense emotional reactions for maybe smaller bad things, but also smaller good things, or substances, or your experiences just have a higher degree of sensitivity, then of course you can understand yourself, you can understand where that's coming from, and be a bit more skillful in managing yourself and managing your environment. Of course, the same implication exists for your relationships, particularly if you're raising a child or children, is to understand that these orchids, right, are going to respond in a way that's a bit more pronounced to both the bad and to the good. And you need to be a very nourishing or supportive relator to that person given their natural sensitivity disposition. And of course, so then that can inform how you raise them, how you care for them, or like I said, even if it's just friends and family, how you relate to them, being a bit more mindful of their tendencies and their reactions. So I hope you learned something in this video. I certainly did not know that this was kind of an established biological and psychological principle, but there you have it, that different individuals are kind of naturally wired with different levels of sensitivity. Some are more what I would call highly leveraged, so they're going to experience both the good and the bad more intensely, and so that they're going to be more attuned to their environment. It's going to have a greater impact on them. Some people are just a bit more kind of, the volume is turned down a little bit, so to speak, and these are the dandelions that are going to be more resilient to their environment, right? And then we have a big group of people, about 40%, that are in the middle. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Here's one that YouTube suggests you'll like. As always on this channel, I share interesting insights I've learned from both the arts and, in this case, the sciences to help you be happier in both work and life. So thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.